What's up, people? My name is Shaggy, the Opinionated Hippie. Currently discussing all things Bob Dylan, and this is going to be a list or a ranking of my favorite, or a ranking of his live albums. Not the bootleg series, not any archival stuff. Just the live albums that he released in sort of the course of his normal release schedule, sort of like as like 70s and 80s bands, like rock in particular. Like if you had 4 or 5 albums, then you would like just like put out the obligatory live album while you took a break from touring or recorded another album, that sort of thing. And once Dylan got in the hang of doing it, he did it quite frequently in the second half of the 70s and then early 80s. And then he did 2 more that I'm going to talk about up through the 90s. And that's it. Not going to talk about the celebration that he did, in which like a bunch of artists came out. Neil Young, Clapton, Harrison, a whole bunch of other people covered his material, because that's, even though it's live, it is covers of him and it is not him, other than 2 songs. And I don't like covers albums unless it's the Spaghetti Incident by Guns N' Roses. Other than that, I detest I detest cover albums for some reason. Don't know why. But anyways, I am going to, because I don't like cover albums, I'm going to, after this video, I'm going to take a break and do some more Zappa for a while. But then the next thing I'm going to do is I am going to listen to those 5 cover albums, the 6 cover albums that Dylan did, and actually rank and review those. I'm going to force myself to do it. Don't know how many times I'll be able to tolerate those albums, but I'm going to do that anyways, just to punish myself. It is over 100 degrees here in Texas, and it's not even summer. So just, it's all about punishment this year. But anyways, yeah, I guess that's it. Yeah, these are the live albums as my favorite to not favorite. I think, I don't know. About Bob Dylan live. Bob Dylan live is almost unlike any other artist live, because like with like a Frank show, let's take Zappa, since I did start this channel to discuss all things Zappa. Dylan falls under that umbrella, Flakes, other things. Like a Frank show, you would go to see a concert, and because he would have different bands on different tours, you could hear a handful of songs that had pretty drastically different arrangements than the original versions, or the versions you were familiar with. Most of the songs would sound the same, other than like differences in instrumentation and stuff like that. But other than that, he would tweak a handful of them. Dylan tweaks them all. Like he just does. Like that's what he does. And he has 2 ways that I see that he tweaks them, and there's kind of a continuum, and most songs fall along this continuum, I would say. This is how I think I've come to understand how he approaches live material, even up through the current era, is he either like takes out the core melody of the song, never quite actually sticking to it 100%, but having like maybe 95% of it recognizable, throwing in some extras, ahs, or weird endings. And then he just writes a whole new musical sort of support for it. So you're listening to a song, you're like, oh, I like this groove. What song is this going to be? And you're like, oh, he's throwing Maggie's Farm in on this. All right. And then Dylan tries to like force these lyrics or overlay them over something. And it's interesting. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But I think it's always compelling. Sometimes always compelling. Can't fool all the people some of the time. And then the other thing he does is like he takes the melody of a song. Let's imagine the melody is like a glass rod, and he throws it on the ground and breaks it into pieces, and then tries to reassemble those pieces in weird fragmented ways. So when you're listening to the song, you're like, oh, those are the words to Tombstone Blues. But, oh wait, there's a part of a melody I recognize. Oh yeah, not anymore. And sometimes like those chunks break in larger pieces, so you get more like melodic runs that you're used to. But most of the time they're like really short snippets that don't quite fit together, and you're just like, yeah, this is a completely different song. I just happen to know the lyrics to it. And I think most of his live stuff runs somewhere on that continuum of things he's doing to the lyrics and the music behind it and all that stuff. And one of the things he does tend to do, he likes to like have like artificial stops, or like sort of a halting musical, almost like, you know, like you're gonna like break down and then build back up, or come to this like early premature ending but then go back into the song. He does a lot of that to sort of highlight the different verses, or to highlight the endings of phrases and stuff like that. That I think doesn't always work as well as he thinks it does, but it's interesting. And sometimes it works amazingly well. I think he has a very strong track record with Maggie's Farm. He tends to tweak Maggie's Farm every time that gets played. And I think he has a good track record with that one. Some of the others, not so much. But yeah, that's what I'm going to talk about. Enough rambling. On to, there are 6 of them that I'm going to do. So on to number 6. Number 6, MTV Unplugged. This came out in 1994. It is a part, not all, of an MTV Unplugged session. I have a problem with this because, like cover albums, I generally don't like unplugged albums. Not like early acoustic Dylan. Like if you give me a man and his guitar playing acoustic songs that were meant to be played acoustic, I have no issue with that. But if you're just gonna like unplug your instruments but then have like a drummer playing like what sounds like a full kit, it's just everybody else is just playing like acoustic, but you're still gonna just play your songs, I'm not interested, especially if there's electric versions out there. I don't like this album. Reckoning, the Dead album, generally leaves me just whatever. Give me noise, give me electricity, give me fuzz, give me static, give me that stuff. Not a big fan of it. That doesn't mean there aren't some good moments on this, but even if it wasn't unplugged and you gave me these performances electrified, there are one in particular that is the most phenomenally underwhelming disappointment, I think, in his entire live catalog. And we'll get to that later. But a single CD, and I think the opening, like Tombstone Blues, it opens with Tombstone Blues, right? And it doesn't seem like he's tweaked it as much as he's taken what, like, let's say the melody is like this like jagged rock, and he's like just like polished it until it's completely flat, and like only maybe a little bit of the melody remains that you can grab onto. And really, I think the only thing interesting about this version is that it is Tombstone Blues. Like, I don't think the music is anything other than just kind of, I don't know what the music is on this. It's acoustic. It's all kind of slightly folky, country-ish, but then it's just kind of, it sounds like Garcia Grisham. I can never remember how to say his name. Garcia Grisham. Whatever. The David guy that Garcia used to play with. It sounds like that, but without their spunk and their fire and the energy that the two of them brought to just like being happy to collaborate with each other. This just, I don't know, it has a sound that doesn't appeal to me, but the Tombstone Blues just kicks it off with just like utter, like, if it was any other band doing this, I wouldn't care. It's just like, oh, this is Tombstone Blues? Okay, that's interesting. But then there's some interesting things. You get at the time, the first ever release of John Brown from an unreleased track from it. I think the first album, if I'm not mistaken, but an early album. You get the first version of Dignity, which at that point was just an outtake and not been released on a bootleg series. I don't think it's as strong as a version as we would finally get, but it's Dignity and it's still a pretty good song. Hate to say, oh no, that's not this album. That's another album. Ooh, I was about to like break. Oh no, yeah. I hate to say this. It is this album. I said on another video, or maybe I did not say this. I did say this on a video, a Grateful Dead video, I think. Knocking on Heaven's Door is a song that only should ever have been performed by Bob Dylan on the soundtrack to Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid. Nobody else ever should have ever covered it because nobody has ever improved upon the original. The only person that has permission that should ever play that song live again, no, don't ever, the Dead, anybody who does Knocking on Heaven's Door, stop doing it. They're never any good live. Dylan perfected it the first time. This version on this album might be the highlight of the album, which just pains me to say because John Brown is on here, and I think John Brown is a great track. But I like this Knocking on Heaven's Door. Like, it's on like the second half of the album when it's after, I think it's... it's several songs after Desolation Row, which just is phenomenally underwhelming and one of the most disappointing things I've ever heard live. It doesn't sound like Desolation Row. It sounds like Suburban Street Row, and it's just like, I don't know. It is boring. I don't know what it is. I don't like this version of it. And so I've sat through this painful Desolation Row like midway through the album the Knockin' on Heaven's Door is something I actually look forward to, and I actually think it's pretty good. Another good thing about this album is All Along the Watchtower is the third song, not saved as sort of a climax at the end, but just a really nice early song, upbeat song. So two things that I might not ever look at a set list and go, I don't want to hear those songs again, on this album might be the highlights. What else is on here? The Times They Are A-Changin', which sounds like, this is 94, it sounds like Dylan is sick of politics. He's not going to fight for anything. He doesn't care. Whatever. Blah. Just what. It sounds like he is as checked out of being an activist as he could possibly be. This is a horrible song. Not a horrible song, a horrible version. You get Rainy Day Women 12 and 35, which I'm like, just like, why? Like a Rolling Stone, which again, I don't ever need to hear that song again live. And then it closes with God on Our Side, which was from one of his earlier albums. And the earlier album version has this very kind of almost like reluctant, hesitant, like herky-jerky kind of like tension building vibe to it that this one does not have at all. My understanding, if I remember, this was a hugely popular record. It is Dylan, like, if Dylan is like wild, frizzy, crazy hair, this is Dylan with like the shortest, neatest, trimmest haircut possible, well shaved, no facial hair, maybe just a splash of appropriate cologne to not offend anybody. This is Dylan at his safest. Still a couple good moments, but this is something I will probably never listen to again after I've done this video. I will never listen to it again. I listened to it a couple days ago to remind myself why I didn't like it. Probably won't visit this one again, especially because the things that were only on this album then have now been released on other things. So we have those. But yeah, that's it. Number 6, MTV Unplugged. Oh, and one more thing. I don't like the sound of his voice on this album. He sounds like a caricature of Dylan, of himself. I just don't like the way he sounds. This is probably my least favorite sounding Dylan voice, is this version of Dylan. All right, on to number 5. Number 5, Dylan and the Dead. I have talked about this album before when I did my Grateful Dead album reviews. And I think this is a good album, man. I don't understand the critic hate, the general hate of this album. I am a hardcore Deadhead. I have probably listened to more Dead in my life than I have Frank. Those are the two leading contenders in that category. So I am well versed in my Deadness, and I think this is a solid album. Not because of the Dead though, but because of Dylan. I think Dylan is in just really good. I like the sound of his voice. I like the songs. I like the energy he's bringing. I think this is the better version of Joey out of between this and the Desire version. I like this one better. It's a really good Slow Train. There's a really good Gotta Serve that I think are funky. I like the I Want You. I think Jerry's guitar sound on the I Want You, perfect. Queen Jane Approximately sounds great. I wish that was not the song the Dead decided they wanted to do from there on out, as I think Slow Train Coming sounds like if this had been a Dead version of Slow Train Coming, it would like open the second set and then they would just jam out of that into something else. But instead it has this awkward sort of like vocal like fade out at the end that almost seems like improvised, like the Dead didn't know what they were doing, Dylan didn't know what they were doing, they just kind of ended it that way. Still a great performance. But man, listening to this, I really wish Dylan was more of a musician and was comfortable like either playing the piano or playing the guitar and like jamming with the Dead, because to have Slow Train Coming, like to jam out of that and then have like a 4 or 5 minute exploration and then to ease into I Want You would have been phenomenal. To hear like Dylan playing piano while Midland's on the organ, or have 2 rhythm guitar players, whatever, harmonica solo, I don't care. There's so much potential here. The Dead did take some of these songs. They did start playing them live after these shows. But I don't think they picked in all cases the right one. So there's a Joey on here that I like. I like the All Along the Watchtower. It's pretty much kind of a Dead version of All Along the Watchtower. The only song I don't like is it closes with Knockin' on Heaven's Door, which is just right? I've just ranted about how much I don't like that. David Grisman, that's his name. David Grisman, Grisman, right? All right, got that taken care of. But anyways, I think this is a solid album. Not Dylan's best live album. There are 4 more to go, obviously. By no way the Dead's best live album. Not even close. But not even in the discussion. Not even at the table. Probably not even allowed to watch through the window. But I don't think it's a bad album. And I do think it serves Dylan better than it serves the Dead. But I do think the Dead are a serviceable working band that supports Dylan in a good way. I enjoy it. So I like Jerry's guitar sound. I like Midland's backing vocals. I like the, other than Knocking on Heaven's Door, the song selection. Again, yeah, just a solid album. Number 5, Dylan and the Dead. Number 4, Hard Rain. This came out in 1976, right? Yeah, 1976. This is sort of I think the second to last show of what, eventually started as the much more extravagant Rolling Thunder Review Tour. That was a bootleg series box set, which is going to get much love when I do the bootleg series. More love than this is going to get, though this is a really good album. I think this is something that I do listen to a lot. It has a weaker, I think the first half of it is a single CD, a single album. Side A, I think, is a lot stronger than Side B. I think Side B is a little too Dylan being ambitious and trying to do too many starts and stops and trying to change the arrangement, that sometimes the arrangement is the attraction and it takes away from the words. But I do think it has a good energy. I know this is just generally, again, I was reading reviews of these albums because I haven't checked in on the Dylan critical sort of how he's being reviewed, and this album still doesn't get a lot of love, and I think it's a pretty good sounding album, especially the first side. I think there's some really strong performances, and even the second side, which I think ultimately fails, it's still interesting and intriguing, and I'm still you're at least taking chances, Dylan. You're not just going out there and playing the hits and just you're not being a robot, you're not being a machine. So I applaud the effort. I just don't think the results are that good. The songs opens up with Maggie's Farm, great version, and then there's a One Too Many Mornings, a Stuck Inside of Memphis, Stuck Inside of Mobile with the Memphis Blues again. Great performance of that. I do think that's one of the highlights of the album. Oh Sister sounds phenomenal. I love Oh Sister. And then a Lay Lady Lay, which is him starting to force words into different music, and that ends side A, and then you continue with that almost to its detriment on side B. Shelter from the Storm, You're a Big Girl Now, which has these almost complete talk meltdowns in the middle of their songs where things just fall apart and then it builds back up, and I just don't think it works at all. I threw it all away. And then an Idiot Wind, which is pretty good, but again, he tweaks with the melody enough in certain places where you're just but you've just robbed that line of its power. That, I think that is a big problem with a lot of Dylan, is his original released versions, for the most part, are perfect. Really. Well, Blood on the Tracks. Anything after that is a deviation from, for me, what is perfection. And so I almost want him to just go out there and perform it to the best of his ability without tweaking it or rearranging it with a song like that, because you're not going to achieve perfection. And so you're really just drawing attention to the fact that you're deviating from that norm. But anyways, I also praise him for trying to. So anyways, I have mixed emotions because when it doesn't work, I wish he would do something different. When it does work, as I think it does on the first half of this album, I'm happy with the results. So Hard Rain, I think it's got a good energy. I think it's an intriguing listen. It's one of those that if you're a Dylan fan, you need to hear it at least once, because you might like what he does to these songs, and this might be the thing that you're whoa, that put that in a new light for me. So anyways, yeah, I don't got much to say about this other than it's just another really good solid listen. So I think the other 3 are a step above this one, but this one is definitely better than the last 2. Number 4, Hard Rain. Number 3, Before the Flood. And yes, this might be on an objective level Dylan's best live album, but it is not my favorite. Sounds great. It was on the tour that Dylan and the band did together. There would be a Dylan in the band set. There was a band set, and then there was a Dylan acoustic set. This album is a double album, so you get side one was all Dylan, side two is all the band, side three was acoustic Dylan and then the band, and then the four was Dylan and the band. And when I say Dylan on the original side, it was Dylan and the band. The only one that doesn't have the band is the acoustic Dylan, which was only 3 tracks, if I'm not mistaken. And then 3 tracks, right? Yeah, 3 tracks. Really good 3 tracks. Phenomenal 3 tracks. But I rank this at number 3 because one, there's too much the band on it. It's not quite the same as the basement tapes. I think the back and forth between them actually in the long run helps. Here, because it's not a back and forth and it's like side one is all this, all of the band stuff is like relegated to the side and like its own little section. And so I don't listen to that unless it's on like Spotify or a streaming or something, just because I don't skip it. But I generally just skip those songs. And so if you're going to skip roughly, what is it, a quarter, about 33% of the album, right? You can't rank it higher than number 3. The performances are great. The energy is great. The band sounds great. This is, again, further evidence in my like desire to have hopefully the band not ever break up and nobody ever die. And every 4 or 5 years, Dylan and the band toured together and did material. It's kind of like a Neil Young Crazy Horse thing. That would have been phenomenal. It's a pretty good set list. You got a lot of hits. But again, fourth song in, knocking on heaven's door. As much as I said nobody should ever perform this, Dylan can do it, and this is actually not a bad performance. And not having it as an encore, having it early in the show, or at least early on the disc, does wonders, and I actually think it's a pretty good performance. But the set list is pretty strong. Most Likely You Go Your Way, great energy. Lay Lady Lay, Rainy Day Women, number 12 and 35. They also do Highway 61 Revisited, and I think the band brings an energy to it that kind of, I think both of those songs on their original context, because of just the way they're played or in arranged or just the sound effects, they have almost like a carnival, like novelty aspect about them. They're not. The lyrics redeem them of that, but this kind of streamlines them both and rock and rolls them in a really good way that I like. It Ain't Me, Babe, Ballad of a Thin Man. You get a bunch of band songs which sound great, but this is a Dylan review. The 3 acoustic numbers, Don't Think Twice, Just Like a Woman, and It's All Right Ma, sound phenomenal. And then the closing disc is sort of like the encores, I'm assuming. Watchtower, Highway 61, Like a Rolling Stone, Blowing in the Wind. Solid performances. I don't think they're anything too spectacular. Everything is kind of tweaked a little, as Dylan does, but not tweaked too much. I think the band, their being familiar with Bob and supporting him brings sort of a little more coherence to everything, so that the tweaking doesn't seem overwhelming at any point. But yeah, it's a solid album, much better than Hard Rain, but it doesn't have the really, really interesting things that I think the next 2 albums have. But yeah, really good album, number 3, Before the Flood, Dylan and the Band. Released in 1974. I think it was released 2 days before my 4th birthday, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, and I wasn't at these shows. I was only 3, so I missed them. All right, okay, but they were in LA, if I'm not mistaken. So I was like right down the road. I could have gone. Maybe I heard it. It was a quiet night. All right, that's it. On to number 2. Number 2, At Budokan. This came out in 1978. Yeah, this got some bad reviews, and it's well-deserved. I'll say that. This is like Bob Dylan tries to be Neil Diamond for a tour, and he has like backup singers that aren't quite they're very Las Vegas-y. He's got a violin player that doesn't quite have the grit of, say, a Scarlett Rivera. He has a saxophone player that wants to be Clarence Clemens, but isn't quite there yet. There is one more horrible player that keeps popping up. Oh, a flute player that's not quite, Ian Anderson from Jethro Tull. It just all sounds Vegas-y and schmaltzy, and Dylan, I can imagine him coming out in a white suit. Sounds like Monty Python is doing like mock versions of these songs. But like the opening song, which sounds great. I really enjoy it. It's Mr. Tambourine Man with this just really happy flute going on. I don't think both hands are. It's just it all sounds wrong, but man, the more I listen to it, the more I enjoy it. Except for one song, which still pisses me off to this day. But the arrangements are incredible. Like you're just all of a sudden, I think it's "Oh Sister," which has all of a sudden just this funky groove, and you're just like, what are we grooving at? And then he starts singing "Oh Sister," and you're like, man, that was hot. Or there's some reggae stuff on here, which is horrible, horrible. Like there's no excuse. It is so bad. It's just fa reggae badness. But it's a car wreck. It's like Crash. You not Crash, the horrible one about race, but the novel Crash, the Ballard Crash. I think Cronenberg made a movie about it. It's like that kind of Crash. Like I am obsessed with how bad these arrangements are. Like, yeah, but I'm starting to really like them. But the set list is also really good. So that's another frustrating thing about this album is I really like the set list. Even though there are a bunch of greatest hits in there, there's also a bunch of greatest hits that at least through the live canon were not represented a lot as live versions. I wish there were better live versions in this, but these are the ones we have, and I've learned to absolutely love them over the years. But then there are some pretty neat choices. So it is a double album. Side 1, Mr. Tambourine Man, Shelter from the Storm, Love Minus Zero, Ballad of a Thin Man, and Don't Think Twice, It's Alright. I think Don't Think Twice, It's Alright is one of the reggae victims. It's a pretty bad way to end that set. But I really like the energy of these songs. They just have some funky arrangements. Just feels really good. Side 2, Maggie's Farm, gets another spectacular funky arrangement. One More Cup of Coffee, which is a great choice. Like a Rolling Stone, I Shall Be Released. And then two really nice selections. Is Your Love in Vain off Street Legal. This was the Street Legal tour that this album is documenting. And then Going, Going, Gone off Planet Waves, that's an awesome choice there. And then side 3, you get what I think is easily, in my case, the low point of the album. An utterly just fangless, just AM radio, not even soft rock FM radio version of Blowing in the Wind. That is just horrible, but compelling in its badness. Just Like a Woman. Oh Sister, which, Oh Sister is phenomenal. Simple Twist of Fate, which I think is another one that is a really weird, kind of funky vibe. A Watchtower. And then I Want You, which just gets kind of slowed down and like sparsified and has this almost eerie quality to it. Short, unfortunately, but probably one of the more memorable 2.5 minutes of the entire album that almost also kind of sounds like nothing else Dylan has done as far as taking songs and like doing this to them. And then the final side, All I Really Want to Do, Knocking on Heaven's Door, which I'm not going to praise. A song I'm going to talk about after I talk about Forever Young and the Times They Are Changing. Kind of a weak ending, but the song that I absolutely hate the arrangement to, but is one of the reasons why this is my second favorite album, is the arrangement to It's Alright Ma, I'm Only Bleeding. It is a full band version. It's got this crazy little riff that they keep repeating over and over again. I think his performance is so over the top. It completely robs the lyrics of any sort of their power. But at the same time, it is like, I feel like I'm sitting in like a Vegas, like I feel like Rocky 4, right? Rocky 4 is the one where they do the Living in America thing and they do all that glitz and glory. That's what I feel like. I feel like I'm about to watch a boxing match and Bob Dylan comes out and with like backup dancers and sequins and glitter and he's singing this song and it's like supposed to be this hard-hitting like political activist anthem and it's just like, what are you doing, dude? It reminds me, I think one of the reasons I like this album is one of the very first albums I ever heard a lot in my life was Neil Diamond's Hot August Night. My grandmother had that. She played that a lot. I think I borrowed it from her. So then my mom had it in her car for a while. I absolutely love that album. Actually went and saw Neil Diamond a couple years ago, which was very interesting. We saw Neil Diamond in like the AT&T Center. But About 5 minutes before the show started, I never experienced this in my life. 5 minutes before the show started, they were like, the show is going to begin in 5 minutes, in exactly 5 minutes. At that point, the lights will dim and it will become dark. Make sure you are near somewhere you can safely sit or safely walk so you are not caught in an unexpected situation. Or like it was really like, oh, they're preparing me for it to get dark. Like my wife and I are, when we saw him, I was in my early 40s. She was in her late 30s. I think we were the youngest people there. But it was Neil Diamond, and it was glitzy, and it was over the top, and that's what I think this Bob Dylan reminds me of. It reminds me very much of just a showman, but it is so compelling. And yes, this got horrible reviews. I don't begrudge anybody for not liking it, but if you are a Dylan fan and you are familiar with these songs, you are compelled to listen to them because they are just some of the most fascinating. I mean, the late 70s, man. We talk about the 80s doing some stuff to Dylan. Dylan did this to himself, man. Like, this was no producer. I'm assuming Dylan made these choices himself because this was him on tour. I'm assuming he takes the reins. And these are some weird, weird choices. And there are a couple songs, I think it's like Simple Twist of Fate, where like I really like the flute in Mr. Tambourine Man Doesn't Bother Me. And I think the second song is A Simple Twist of Fate. No, the second song is Shelter from the Storm. I think that's the one that all of a sudden we get this saxophone solo after what I'm like, oh, this is pretty good. And then it's like, oh, God, that was horrible. But it's probably the album I'm going to go listen to when I'm done making this video because I am utterly fascinated by this train wreck of an album. Yeah, I talked for longer about this thing than I have anything else. And I will admit, it's not that good. But it is my second favorite at Budokan. Number one, Real Live. This came out in 1984. This is just a nice, slim rock and roll band. Mick Taylor, formerly of the Stones, is on guitar. This is a nice guitar album. A couple acoustic tracks. Great acoustic tracks. Great energy. Great arrangements. Single album, now a single CD. Yeah, like it's just high energy, great arrangements. This is what's on it, and this is why it's great. Opens up with a Highway 61 Revisited that just rocks, a Maggie's Farm, another sort of Maggie's Farm arrangement that kills it. I, which is a great choice. I think one of the better tracks off Infidels. This is a better version than the album version. Not as good as the most recent Bootleg Series version, which is great. Excellent song choice. License to Kill, not as good of a song off that album, but still a good song. And It Ain't Me, Babe, an acoustic It Ain't Me, Babe, in which the audience is kind of singing along. He plays the harmonica and just kind of repeats the same, like, not even a phrase, just kind of repeats the same note, like, over and over and over and over. And as he does it, the audience just gets more excited and intense and cheers, and just the energy is phenomenal. That's side A. Side B opens up with Tangled Up in Blue. Famous because it has a different set of lyrics, a more streamlined set of sort of single narrative lyrics where like you have he's and she's, and it seems like maybe he's trying to like actually give you the roadmap to what it's really about. Don't think it's as good as the original, but it is a compelling listen. Again, the original will always be there, so I'm glad this is here. Masters of War. Love this version of Masters of War. Just a great rock and roll version of Masters of War. And my favorite moment on the entire album, because very few albums do this, is as Masters of War's ending, Ballad of a Thin Man begins out of it. And so you get like an overlap, like the energy propels you from one track to the other. And very few live albums, none of Dylan's live albums do that. You hear a song, it ends, you get some audience noise, you go to the next one. This one, you actually feel the energy of these performances. Girl from the North Country, and then Tombstone Blues to close it out. I think Santana sits in on the Tombstone Blues, but it's just a great Tombstone Blues. Yeah, man, just a great song. You got 3 Highway 61 songs. You got a Maggie's Farm. Got a couple new tracks that sound great. Some great acoustic stuff, and just a not as good a version of Masters of War because, again, perfection the first time out. But if you're going to redo a song and give it like a rock vibe, that's how you do it, man. This Masters of War, like, that should have been a hit. That should have been like an 80s hit. Reagan probably wouldn't have allowed it, but it should have been. I don't know. Yeah, just a really perfect high energy single album, a perfect dose of live Bob Dylan. Yeah, that's all I'm going to say about this, other than it's a good rock version. Again, he's tweaking stuff. He's messing with the lyrics. He's messing with the flow, putting spaces where there may not need to be spaces in songs, making things longer than probably they should have. As always, just being Dylan. But I think he hits it out of the ballpark. Ballpark? Yes, on all of these. So yeah, easily my favorite. The one I listen to the most. I think by far the most satisfying of his official live albums. And that is all I have to say about Bob Dylan's live albums. I'm going to take a break. If you're watching this in real time, I'm going to jump back and do some Zappa, dive back into some Beat the Boots action, because I just revisited those, and those are pretty good. Now I remember why I got into live Zappa in the first place. Those Beat the Boots helped a lot, and I know you can still get them, so I'm going to praise them, rant and rave. And then I'm going to return and do some like bootleg series stuff, because Dylan's bootleg series release is possibly the most impressive bootleg series release of any artist, I think, as far as like lack of fluff goes, maybe, or lack of repeating stuff, or if he does repeat stuff, it's with on buried among 6 other discs of like brand new stuff, so who cares. But yeah, the bootleg series is phenomenal. But that's it, man. Let me know why I'm wrong, why Before the Flood is the best, why At Budokan is crap, what I missed, why I should give Unplugged a second chance, because unless somebody convinces me it's worth checking out, I will never listen to that album again. But anyways, yeah, that's it. I'm done. Thanks for watching. It's hot here in Texas. If I survive the 100-degree weather, I will make another video at some point in the future. All right, y'all. Thanks for watching. Subscribe, peace, comment, all that stuff. Take care, and you be you. I and I. Whatever.